back with Eddie and Rocky. And Rock, we got quite a guest.
Got a pretty big guest, and someone that we share a lot in common, right? Same name, Rocky.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Went to Notre Dame.
Yep.
Both played for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Both have won Super Bowls. So it's a very similar career. Me and Rocky Bleier, who's our guest.
He got a little more jewelry than.
Just an amazing American story, and not a lot. And for people that don't know, went to Notre Dame, won a national championship, gets drafted in the NFL. After his first year, gets drafted into the Army, goes to Vietnam, serves the country, gets injured. Comes back and winds up resuming his career that lasted another 10 years, 4 Super Bowls, and now he does a lot around town, or around the country, I should say, helping Vietnam veterans and things like that in a great event coming up.
Yeah, and well, before let's ask Rocky Bleier here. Tell people who aren't old enough to remember what exactly your story was. Rocky, would you kind of revisit what your experience was like in Vietnam?
Well, okay, fine. So, you just got to go back to got to go back to that time, that era, 1968, and people say, well, how did you get drafted? Doesn't the NFL take care of you and so on? But this was the height of the war. This was the most people that they had in country. They had over 500,000 soldiers in country at that time. And so, the draft was prevalent, and it was one of those things that however, you slipped through the cracks, and I got drafted. And so after 10 games, my rookie year, all of a sudden I found myself on a plane going to basic training and then advanced infantry training, and then went out to California and jumped on a plane and landed in South Vietnam of May of 1969. And so I was attached to a unit there, the 196th Brigade, 4th and 31st Infantry. And so we were working south of Da Nang, actually, in a place called Hep Duc Valley. And so eventually in August of that year, we were in a military movement with soldiers from the north coming down from the DMZ. There was a influx of Vietnamese soldiers that were coming down to Hep Duc. There was a whole regiment to take over that area, and so we caught ourselves in a pincher movement with the Marines coming down from the north, and we were holding force in the south, and which ultimately ended up in a firefight on several occasions, and in one of those, in retrieving some of our wounded fellow soldiers, obviously ran into another firefight, and so I was in the rice paddy at the time, and I got hit the first time in the rice paddy. Then we dropped back, and then they probed our perimeter, or got close enough, and a hand grenade came flying through and ended up between my feet and blew up before I could get out of the way, and blew up through my legs and feet and so on. So that's what had taken place, and eventually, we were finished that firefight, dragged out of there, and eventually got to a security area.
Well, and Rocky, it's an amazing story. And first of all, it's just amazing. Think right now, if, say, war broke out tomorrow, Joe Burrow getting drafted into the military, or Ben Roethlisberger getting drafted it would never happen these days, I don't think. But a credit to you is a different time, maybe a better time where I don't know, where folks were, it wasn't a big thing where, hey, you're an American and you can go serve the country and that sort of thing. But it's incredible. Just your entire life path, but just in general, just talk about your experience. What did your experience fighting for the country mean to you?
There's a couple things that has taken place now, because we are now looking back over 50 years from that experience, from the Vietnam end of that Vietnam conflict and war. And so, the thing I really think that a saving grace was the fact that I had played organized sports. I'd played college sports. I was in somewhat better shape maybe than some of my fellow soldiers at that time, coming right from Pittsburgh. And so, but the interesting thing was, going through basic training and AIT wasn't any different than going through summer camp and training when you're in college and or in the professional league. And so it's just grit and grin, and you get through it, and whatever it might be, you find a camaraderie because of a commonality. And we can make a whole lot of relationships between locker rooms, and rice paddies and or LZs in which you operated out, or wherever you may be, because it's the immediacy of the moment, of the time, the things you experience together. It was also different than unlike today, and this is, I'm just putting this in perspective, is that today, and at least maybe what the military found out, you get much better coming together, forming of a group when they train together. So you got our soldiers today that train together, they deploy together, they come back from their deployment, and then they go back to training together. In Vietnam, except for the initial insurgent of our military, was a replacement war. So guys would come in at different times, and in 2, 3 at a time, or whatever it might be. So it wasn't. So you didn't have that. You didn't have that sense or a true sense of having someone's back, of understanding, coming out of the same community or wherever it might be. And so it took a little longer for that bond to take place. And so that was somewhat, how can I say that? So you're somewhat isolated in that case. And so when you left by yourself. And you came back to, if you were just putting your time in, you came back to a civilian world that did not embrace you like they embrace our service people today. And you were identified with the conflict and not as a soldier. And so you had to repress your feelings. And I felt badly about some of those experiences that those guys had to go through. At times, I've heard stories of them saying the announcement over the plane. I think it would be best if you would change into your civilian clothes before we land, so that you are not identified as a soldier, and hopefully get through this. So and they didn't, and that soldier in mass really didn't have anything to come back to. There was no welcoming, there was no warmth, there was isolation basically, and they had to repress their feelings, and they went back to school or a job. There wasn't any place for them to go and talk about what had taken place, so that was even worse. And you find out a little bit better today, but there was a whole period of time where I would talk to kids of veterans and say, Dad never talked about Vietnam. He didn't talk about his experience, and he wouldn't talk about his experience, and so on. And part of that, it was somewhat of a shame, I would think, for a future generation, because there was a whole generation there that did not get any sense of what it was like to represent their country and fight in a war. Unlike World War II, even then going into Korea, and some of those soldiers, were caught in between before Vietnam came up. And so then, that Vietnam soldier just had the American Legion. There was no place for them to go. The VFW, there was no necessarily place. They weren't welcome in that case. And so there was this whole sense of somewhat of an isolation. Now, over the period of time, and especially now with the 50th anniversary, people are embracing that better, and they understand better what had taken place in our culture.
What's bringing us to, and we're talking to Rocky Bleier, former Steeler NFL great. And Rocky, that's what brings you to town to support your brothers in arms. And that's coming up here, I believe, 3 weeks from today.
It is on the 29th. And so this is a superb event. And I'm sure it's happening around, but it's happening in the Cincinnati area, with the 50th anniversary tribute to the Vietnam veterans at Xavier University's Cintas Center. And so it's open to all veterans. It's open to all veterans, free of charge, to be able to come, and that's put on by the urology group there in Cincinnati, who have been great supporters of military people and personnel. And so this is open. It starts at 5 o'clock, or it'll start at 5 o'clock, and there will be food there to eat and drinks, obviously, and then the program starts around 7 o'clock, and it's really kind of a throwback of the Bob Hope kind of shows that we saw during World War II. That's what they want to duplicate. And so we're really asking, for those who are available to be able to come and join us and be a part of that wonderful evening.
All right. Rocky Bleier, thank you so much.
Very cool.
Thank you very much, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys when we get in town on the 29th.
I'd like to see if Rocky Boiman can catch Rocky Bleier
No
to this
way.
day.
No way.
Hey, Rock! Before you go, I gotta go. There's always a story when you have a unique name, unlike the majority of people. So, how did you get Rocky?
Well, the real reason is my dad's best friend's brother's name was Rocky. His friend Rusty Sushine, his brother's name was Rocky, so that was the first time he heard it. But also the movie Rocky came out in, 1976? I was born in 1980, so maybe that was top of mind of my parents as well.
Okay, it's always,
Yes.
and then having that. So my real name is Robert
Yes.
Patrick. And so I got Rocky. Obviously, I was the first. Well, I should say that, not obviously. I was the first born in the family, and like all fathers, you're very proud of your kids. And so you get this little son, and Mom and Dad ran a bar, and so the patrons would come into the bar and they'd say to my dad, Bob, "Hey, Bob, how's that new kid of yours?" Oh, he'd be very proud, and he'd say, "Oh, you should see him. He's got all these little muscles. He looks like a little rock sitting in that crib."
Nice.
Then they'd come back the next night, have 2-3 beers, and they go, "Hey, Bob, how's that little rock of yours?" He goes, "What do you mean? You're a kid,
There you go. Well,
that's all I got.
As you well know, if your name's Rocky, you kind of got to be tough for a little bit, and you're probably not going to be a piano player, right? So
You're right. You're right.
there you go. Well, Rocky, listen, great interview. Really appreciate your time, and have a great event. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, fine. Thanks, Eddie Rock. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Rocky Bleier. That event is 3 weeks from today at Cintas Center. Find out more.
There you go.